Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum viewers. I'm your host S.M. Hali with another edition of Defense and Diplomacy. India is amassing weapons way beyond its legitimate needs, and one of its aspirations is to achieve the nuclear triad, that is delivery systems and weapon platform from both the air, sea, as well as, in addition, the subsurface. And in this regard, it has achieved the Hind, which is an indigenously developed nuclear-powered submarine, and it has acquired nuclear-powered submarines on lease from Russia. Sir, just for the sake of our viewers, if you could briefly tell us what are the advantages of a nuclear-powered submarine over a conventional submarine?
Well, in simple terms, it is the duration and the stamina to stay at sea which almost becomes infinite. It increases manifold in case of a nuclear submarine. Conventional submarine is supposed to come up 15 to 17% of the time to charge its batteries by what we call snorkeling. But nuclear submarine doesn't have to do this, so can stay subject to human stamina almost unlimited underwater.
I see, sir. So with that brief addition to our knowledge, Advocate, we had done a program earlier in 2010 when the Hind had just been completed and was commencing its sea trials. And now I believe it's about to complete them and is likely to be inducted by the Indian Navy. How do you see this threat?
Major threat. A major threat realized, and the Indians are making a great headway at the expense of Pakistan's sovereignty in the Indian Ocean. That is point number one. A nuclear triad, be it airborne nuclear assets of a country, be it the land-based nuclear assets of a country, or be it the subsurface submarine-based weapon systems that can, these three things actually constitute what is called a nuclear triad. India, with the acquisition of a leased submarine called Aquila from Russia, has entered the very limited group of those countries that have the capability of completing, at least initially completing, a triad. By the end of this year, India's indigenous nuclear power submarine will be actually operational also. Even if it is not operational by the end of the year, it will be operational in the few months after that. Third point, since India has completed initially its nuclear triad, where is the threat coming from for which India needs this nuclear triad? In the Indian Ocean. This is in addition to about 18 conventional submarines, although some of them will be retired, but 18, India already has a flotilla of almost 18 conventional submarines.
But with the addition of the Aquila class, as well as its three, indigenously developed, it's likely to have 5 to 6. Would you like to add something to this?
Yes. I think according to the interpretation and intelligence, it is fair to assume that 2020, India will have around 24 conventional submarines, that means deployable about 2018 to 20. And she would have around 3 to 5 nuclear submarines, because indigenous construction sometimes is suffering from delays, etc. But it will be, I think, good intelligent guess she would have 3 to 5 nuclear submarines. But SSN, not the ballistic, they are working towards that. These nuclear submarines would be able to stay, of course, indefinitely at sea, subject to human stamina, and they'll be able to fire long-range torpedoes and also short-range surface-to-surface missiles. So there is a setup. Now, this being so, many people have asked me, what should be the target for our submarine force? So I have always said that you need 5 to 6 submarines initially to cover their coast, main their areas and where their bases are, and you need another 3 or so to deploy them sea lines of communication to disrupt their oil supplies from the Gulf or from Suez, etc. So let's say deployment in North Arabian Sea. So Pakistan needs 9 operational submarines which means you should have 12 to have operation at number of 9 submarines.
Right, sir. So, Advocate Tariq Pirzada, you were talking about the Aquila class. Now, the Aquila class, while the Indians were on board and trials were taking place, in 2008, off the Sea of Japan, the first Aquila met with an accident in which 21 personnel died. But still, India has completed its sea trials, and it is likely to be handed over to the Indians this very month, in the next day or so. So how do you look at?
Well, as far as the technological disasters are concerned, Aquila has faced that, disaster. So that threat, from the technological point of view in the Indian Ocean next to Pakistan, is very real also. It can happen again, number one. Number two, assuming that everything goes well, let's see what is the direction of the India's amassing its naval forces, and especially the nuclear power. Pakistan is the most immediate country that they want to dominate. They want to dominate Indian Ocean very clearly. They want to dictate all the countries, littoral countries along the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea, because they know there is no other navy in the region. This is a very interesting thing that can come up and counter them. The Iranians do have a small fleet of 3 conventional submarines, but they are facing major problems, and the Iranian Navy is still not.
If you hold that thought, the Admiral wants to make a contribution.
Yes, I think the possession of nuclear submarines, if I may say, it is a strategic weapon, and it is extension of your foreign policy to exert your power in the region. Pakistan, as I understand, has no such ambition, but we being in the region, it will be unfair and wrong to say that we are not concerned. But there are other countries like Australia, like Indonesia, other regional country, Malaysia, who I'm sure feel concerned. Now, talking about Australia and nuclear-free Indian Ocean, you would recall that late 60s or early 70s, Indian stance was to have a nuclear-free Indian Ocean. And now, as we proved with our friend from India in the last program,
Commodore C. Udaya Bhaskar,
yes.
he admitted.
Yes, they said they've changed. So in politics, there's no sort of high moral ground. Like Australia, selling uranium to India, but if it comes to us, they are high moral ground, you see. So Australia also will make no noise under American pressures, my own opinion. But if Indonesia would have a nuclear submarine, you will see that Australia will make noise about it. So concern is there, but I mean, in the regional ambition, etc., I think Pakistan is not part of it, but it's concerned because it's in the region. Yes.
Right, sure.
There are actually, in my judgment, and I'm sure a lot of people would agree with me, that if you look at the way the Americans are using their nuclear power in the Indian Ocean, they're not firing nuclear missiles, but they're using the same subs for conventional purposes, firing, Tomahawk cruise missiles with 1,500 ranges, firing into Somalia, firing into Sudan, firing into any country that in Iraq, everywhere they used it. So if we have a nuclear powered sub, as the Admiral said, we have a subsurface endurance of a naval power for a very long time. Number two, it does create a very strong retaliatory capability for a country like Pakistan, which has a very limited underwater navy at the present time.
And not just that.
And let me just quickly finish.
The point you make cover is the same. It adds to the assured second strike capability.
Absolutely. This is what I was saying, that once you have a nuclear power submarine, you have a subsurface second strike capability, and that creates a very powerful deterrence. As we were discussing a minute earlier, the basic purpose of these strategic weapons is to create deterrence. If India has it, there is, in my judgment, I'm very simple, because there are dual purposes that will be served with the acquisition of a nuclear power submarine, Pakistan cannot allocate a lot of funds to maintain a very large conventional navy. So to be selective, I would go for at least a couple of nuclear power submarines, in my judgment. This is something that has to be seriously concerned, because it will provide both the conventional as well as nuclear purpose, strategic as well as non-strategic purpose.
Right.